There's this guy named JP Sears. He's got like 3 million subbies on YouTube, okay? And it's this guy here on the left. I want to talk about who he is, where he came from, and where he is now, because he just released a video titled, I Changed My Mind About God. Here's why. And this video is just, you know what? I'll let you find out on your own. It's something else. I'll say that. But let me show you the content that I was first introduced to this guy through. This is probably one of his most popular videos, I assume. It's got 16 million views on it or something like that. It's older, though, I think. This is from like 6 years ago, yeah. So it's a short little clip. Just give it a listen. He's a wellness coach and a new age spiritualist guru. I think he's a vegan, or at least a vegetarian and like health conscious, kind of crunchy mommy type of person. So listen to this. It's called If Meat Eaters Acted Like Vegans.
That salad's totally grossing me out. I've completely lost my appetite. How long have you been a meat eater for? I only eat meat. I'm going to the Meat Stock Flesh Festival. Are you going? Yeah, I want the tofu spring rolls, except I don't eat tofu, so do you have like a tofu flavored chicken you can substitute in for me? It's not that vegetable eaters are bad people, it's just that they're terrible people.
It's like really fascinating to me. Like, obviously not all vegans are like this. And like I said, I think he's a vegan, or at least was at the time. But he's drawing attention, interestingly, in an interesting way, to this one quality about one subset of the vegan community. Like sometimes, and this applies to every community, atheists, hell, even Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and everything, when they dive into this whole movement, no matter what it is, they get offended that you're not a part of it too. That's just kind of human nature, you know. And it ultimately leads to like destructive consequences. Like it does not accomplish what you're aiming to accomplish, which presumably is to convert more people to being a vegan, or, you know, converting them away from atheism, or away from religion, or something like that. Being aggressive and condescending and rude and angry doesn't win people over. And I think that's the point he's making here.
This sausage is a meat-based vegetable substitute for cucumber. It's got the taste and the texture of an actual cucumber, with none of the cucumber. Eating plants...
Like, it sounds disgusting, right? Oh my God, I have this, I'm using autofocus on my camera. I guess I could turn it off, but it keeps popping up a little square because of that. If I turn autofocus off, I'll have to focus it myself. It gets complicated. If that square keeps popping up, I will. But by the by, quick thing I want to mention. If you guys watch one of my videos, I would appreciate it if you watch it to the very end. I've seen people suggesting I make them shorter. Let me explain how it works with the YouTube algorithm. Watching to the end is not technically the thing that boosts it, although that, you know, that does help it, having like a higher percentage of watch time all the way through. But what really does it is total minutes watched on a video or on a YouTube channel or whatever. So longer videos actually help, but there's a logarithmic scale. So it starts to go downhill. It starts to be less helpful by having longer videos, and that sweet spot is about 17 minutes between when it starts to get more harmful the longer the videos get. So yeah, I should have shorter videos, people have mentioned, but watching the video beginning to end propels it really, really, really far, and I feel like that's been proven to me very recently, because I asked you guys to do that on my videos, and they've been skyrocketing as a result. It's really fascinating to see the statistics on that. But anyway, if you watch one of my videos, I would appreciate it if you watch it to the very end, because that's how YouTube calculates how far it's going to push the video. Not based on percentage, but based on minutes. So, yeah. The more minutes you spend watching, the more helpful it is to a video. Anyway, keep listening here.
And the texture of an actual cucumber, with none of the cucumber. Eating plants makes your body way too alkaline, which will definitely kill you. Do you really want that? All you need is some meat to be healthy and thrive. You get everything you need from meat. Beef is loaded with carbs. Orcas are even more spiritually evolved than humans, and they only eat seal meat. So that means humans should only eat meat because it's the most spiritually evolved diet because of orcas. Plants give off oxygen. Why would you eat them? Do you even know how dangerous deer are when you're driving your car? If you don't kill and eat deer first, you basically want people to get into car accidents.
It's really interesting how he did this, right? How he kind of draws attention to a lot of the arguments and how they sound when flipped around. I think this is a super fascinating way of attacking the conversation. Now, again, I think this guy is like a vegan or was or something. I don't know. He's a healthy living type of person anyways. But I guess in this video, his intent was, to call out people who use bad arguments that turn people away? I'm not sure.
The world's a much safer place if we eat the animals that could eat us. Broccoli? That's what my food eats. That's my food's food. And I don't appreciate you eating that.
That's really funny.
You should eat Siberian tigers to help them go extinct. It makes it so that they can live on through you and your children for generations to come. The best chance for the survival of their species is for us to kill and eat them. That coconut was going to grow into a palm tree. Why would you eat that? I could never eat plants that are raised in crowded farms and inhumane living conditions with less than 1 square inch of space per stalk, stuck in the soil against their will. Have you ever
Stuck in the soil against their will? That's actually pretty
ever
good.
thought about going meat eater to help save the planet? Or do you just not care about the earth?
Yeah, see, this is the all or nothing kind of fallacy. If you don't take these steps that I believe that you should take, black and white thinking, then you don't care about the movement at all, and you might as well not be involved in any way, and you're worthless, basically. That's the idea. That's really interesting how he draws attention to these.
Have you seen the Kale-spiracy documentary?
Kale-spiracy documentary. That's really interesting, especially considering where he is now. Just remember this in a minute. He talks about the Kale-spiracy documentary.
You gotta see it. It's so heartbreaking seeing how all the plants are killed and the deforestation from the plant farming and unsustainable farming practices. Kale farming is the #1 destroyer of the environment. Once you see it, you'll never eat plants again.
Dude, I'm honestly I can't imagine that he's a vegan and also holding on to pieces of meat this way, right? That seems like something a vegan would be very averse to doing, but I don't know.
As he redundantly repeated his emotionally charged nutritional opinions at me, I was instantly convinced to become a meat eater.
JP was the most illogical, condescending person I've ever met.
Saying something like that's just a symptom of being overly alkaline. It just makes you mean and you can't think straight.
That's funny, dude. I like it, right?
So that you can be a less terrible person, be sure to subscribe to my carnivorous channel.
That's funny. That's really good. The dude has some really on-point stuff. Unfortunately, when COVID hit, in fact, a little bit before COVID, when Donald Trump started coming into the picture, the guy started going downhill hard. It got really bad. He's an anti-vaxxer and has even been cited in a bunch of articles talking about conspiracy theories. Like right here, this is an article by the BBC. What is the Great Reset and how did it get hijacked by conspiracy theories? The Great Reset is just a conspiracy theory. There's nothing more to it. It's complicated, kind of an all-encompassing thing that started when somebody from some NGO near the UN or adjacent to the UN announced a book. And the book basically said, since COVID hit and irrevocably changed world economies, now's our opportunity to rework those economies to be more favorable to the workers. That's the premise behind it. And naturally, anytime there's a pro-worker move or a pro-worker push, a conspiracy theory forms up around it. Kind of weird, right? Who would be anti-worker like that? Who would have anti-worker sentiment and enough money to promote conspiracy theories that would damage a pro-worker movement. We'll never know. So anyways, he got super into the Great Reset conspiracy theory, so much so that he showed up in articles like this one right here. JP Sears posted a video on the playlist Thought Provoking. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. The Great Reset. It just got crazy. So the guy took a downward turn hard, which is really sad because he was kind of funny. He's kind of a funny guy. Well, he just released a video. Let's see. This one was from March 23rd, 2023, titled, "I Changed My Mind About God. Here's Why." Like I said, he was kind of a new age guy. I don't think he was ever like anti-religious or atheist to my knowledge. I think he was just like spiritual. And now it seems like he's kind of taking a hard, I mean, he's already taken the hard right turn. He's taken a hard turn into Christianity now too. So let's listen to this video of his, this explanation for why he has changed his mind on God.
I changed my mind about God. I was wrong. So accordingly, in this video, I want to share with you what I used to believe, what I believe now, and what made me change my mind along the way. And also, very importantly, I want to share with you a few thoughts of mine that I have that will help us bring more God not only into our lives, but also the world around us, which seems like it needs a lot more God right now.
Okay, well, we know how he feels about God now, don't we? So he thinks that the world needs more God right now, the U.S. specifically. He lives in the United States. Also, while we watch this, we are going to play some Pokemon Fire Red. It's just going to be in the background. If you've never played it, don't sweat it. You know, shouldn't bother you too much. But yeah, I think I'm at the point now where it's time to beat the Elite Four. I'm pretty close. Now, I need a little bit more training. So we're going to run up and down here and use our little VS Seeker to get a little more training under our belt. And then we're going to fight the Elite Four.
Around us, which seems like it needs a lot more God right now. Because I don't know about you, but living in a world where Satan reigns and you and I and our families have to suffer the consequences doesn't really feel appealing to me.
Okay, he's building all kinds of assumptions into this right now. Like, the fact that he seems to believe that Satan is reigning supreme and everything like this tells us exactly where he stands. And that he has kind of like detached himself from reality at this point. I mean, like I said, he took a hard right turn. He's like an evangelical extremist now. It's nuts.
And also, quick disclaimer, this video is not intended to be a comedy video. And if that offends you, pray about it. So what
Okay, nobody is like offended by comedy, okay? There is nobody out there that's upset about the fact that you're making jokes. Nobody's upset by this. You know, there's this right-wing movement that wants to convince everybody that, like, no one can make jokes anymore because everyone's always offended. And no one gets offended. If you act like a shithead, then you're going to get criticized for it. Welcome to the real world. That's how this works. You can't be a shithead without being criticized. Sorry. But that doesn't translate into offense. No one is, like, offended by your stupid jokes.
I used to think about God that I now say, yeah, I was wrong about. I used to have a lot of judgment about religion and Christianity, thinking like, it's not bad, but it's like, dude, that's so outdated and like, get with it. Why are you religious when you could be spiritual?
Okay, well, there's your problem. I don't understand what any of that means. Why are you religious when you could be spiritual? What's the difference? Is there a difference at all?
And along with that, I became very inundated in the spiritual movement. So like spirituality, not religion. Like the evolved thinkers are spiritual, not religious. They're also evolved enough to always have to tell you that they're spiritual, not religious. That was me.
Yeah, so he's trying to make it out like he used to be an extremist and he no longer is. I think that he was very, very radical before, and he just moved to a different radical position, but kept the same kind of radical approach, radical mindset.
And while I was in there, I will honestly say I got a lot of benefit from spiritual teachings, like different teachers, different books, different philosophies. I got a lot of benefit from that. But when I look back, I can see I was excluding some amazing traditional Christian values, beliefs of God, and ways of connecting with God that I now really value. But out of what I would call spiritual arrogance, I was excluding them, just judging.
Okay, so he's saying he excluded Christian values out of arrogance? Like what? I mean, I assume he's talking about evangelical extremist values, right? Not like love everybody and don't judge lest ye be judged, the values that Jesus taught, but evangelical values, anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-anything. I assume that's what he's referring to, those types of values. And you think that you are missing out on something by not being anti-gay? Because you were too arrogant to see it's the right thing to do? Like, the things that he's saying right now don't make any sense.
Spiritual arrogance, I was excluding them, just judging them to be, oh, that's old, outdated stuff. And like, nah, y'all need to get spiritual like me. And with that, I didn't believe in the immense power of prayer. I used to think, well, prayer's probably a good thing. It'll maybe give you a more positive mood, a more positive outlook. But I didn't truly believe in the power of prayer, where people are directly asking God for God's support and then receiving that support from God. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there were evidence that that actually happened, then I would be totally 100% down. It's just, there's no evidence of that. Look, let me put it to you this way. If God had a master plan, he wouldn't let, as George Carlin says, he wouldn't let some schmuck with a $2 prayer book come along and fuck up his plan. You're not going to come in and change everything because you feel like it. That's not how it would work. And besides that, we can test this. And it's been tested and unequivocally proven to be false. Praying doesn't help you find your car keys. Praying doesn't cure your friend's cancer. Praying doesn't put food on your table or any of that other stuff. That's not how any of this works. But, okay, keep believing in that, I suppose, if you want. We need real action to solve problems, not prayer.
Support and then receiving that support from God. Yeah, I didn't really believe that it actually happened. And in a minute, I'll get to directly telling you what my beliefs about God now are. But first, what changed me? What happened? What I see that changed my mind? Well, one observation I've had over the past 3 years, especially, was hashtag pandemic.
Yeah, he's a far-right conspiracy theorist now. Plandemic. Oh my God, dude. If you don't know that, it's a fake documentary that's like anti-vaccine and purports that the pandemic was created by people. It's just unhinged from reality, dude. That's the name of it, is Plandemic. Maybe I should watch that on my channel. Oh yeah, if you're interested to something else, every Wednesday and Thursday morning, 10 a.m. or 10:30, I'm sorry, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, I kind of do this. I hang out with people, I talk to the live chat, and watch videos like this. I do it on Twitch and on my Telltale Unfiltered YouTube channel. And I'm thinking tomorrow I might watch Reefer Madness. You guys remember that old movie? It's like an hour long from back in the 1930s, 1936. And it's like anti-weed. And it's just crazy, man. I'm thinking about watching that. It's a really good example of a propaganda film. So I'll take a vote on it tomorrow morning, see if people want to watch it. If you do want to watch it, then come over and vote on that in the morning. Anyway, the point is, Plandemic is just propagandistic garbage. Let's keep listening.
Over the past 3 years, I've found myself accidentally getting more Christian. Like without even intentionally trying, like setting out on a mission, like, hey, I want to become more Christian. It's just been effortlessly happening for me. Now, I don't think I'm unique there because I've seen a lot of people and I've heard a lot of people telling me similar stories.
Wow, really? And you live in the United States, right? Is it really surprising to you that people are effortlessly turning Christian, quote unquote? You think that people are effortlessly turning Christian in Saudi Arabia? You think that's a common occurrence there? Do you think maybe people are turning Christian effortlessly in the United States because that's a majority religion? Did that ever cross your mind?
So I asked the question, why are people getting more Christian without even trying?
Because they're surrounded by it 24/7. It's very intentional. You can't escape it in the United States. What a ridiculous question to even ask.
Here's what I believe to be true about that. The presence of evil and Satan that evil emanates from has never been more obvious, at least in my lifetime. The past 3 years, evil isn't hiding anymore. It's coming at us through authoritarianism, movements, people, groups, companies, governments, trying to invade our minds, invade our God-given free will.
Well, okay, so authoritarian movements are trying to invade our God-given free will. This is really interesting. It's kind of populist language. It's language that can appeal to anybody from any side of the political spectrum, right? But he's not from any old side of the political spectrum. He's from the far right. He's a far right commentator at this point. And that's really what he's talking about. Far right perspectives on authoritarianism. He thinks the radical left is trying to convert your children into being trans and all that other stuff, like the whole 9 yards, all the stuff that extremist Republicans espouse, pretty much, is what he believes, as far as I can tell.
As that's become more obvious, I think there's a natural polarity that happens. If you're not someone who's willing to do the devil's bidding, if you're not someone who's willing to propagate evil, then there's a natural occurrence that happens. When you're in the presence of evil, you polarize to the other extreme. Like you may not even be consciously aware of it, but the presence of evil makes you lean away.
Dude, what is he even talking about right now? He's saying that when you're religious, you polarize against Satan? What?
Then, therefore, what direction are you leaning towards? That would be the direction of God. Certainly the opposite of evil, the opposite of Satan.
Okay, so is this like this is kind of a really interesting twist on the, what would you call it? Like it's a piece of propaganda and it's a logical fallacy. They commonly go hand in hand, but this one is called the bandwagon effect. The most popular group out there is the most correct, right? So there are a billion different religious groups out there, a billion different Christian groups. There are Christian groups out there that accept the LGBT community and believe them to be children of God. And there are some, like the one that he's ostensibly a part of, that hate the LGBT community and think they're children of Satan. But both of those groups believe that they're moving closer to God, which is the larger group. As far as Christians go, I think the extremist group is the larger one. The group that, hates the LGBT community and propagandizes about them constantly. And since that's the larger group, he's kind of leaning into the idea. He's trying to convince you of the idea that they're more correct. Mormonism does the exact same thing. There are like 15 splinter groups of Mormonism. And the largest one, the LDS Church, claims that they're correct because they're the largest. Interesting, right?
The direction of God, certainly the opposite of evil, the opposite of Satan. So I think that's seeing the presence of evil. That's why I've just accidentally been getting more Christian, why so many other people are. Because right now I think the evil that's in this world is doing a great service of driving a lot of people to find God in ways that they previously hadn't. And also specifically, we could say, hey, there is an attempt to bring communism all over the world, certainly in the United States.
Oops, sorry. Really? You think communism is on its way to the U.S.? You think that, like, there's an effort to spread communism worldwide? Really? This is unhinged from reality. What else do I call this? For real. This is nuts. There is no communist effort anywhere. No politicians endorse communism to any degree. What is this guy talking about?
Bring communism all over the world, certainly in the United States. We don't call it that, but it is that.
Well, what do we call it then? What are you talking about?
And it's happening all over the world. And there's a reason why communists have their number one objective to disconnect people from God, where they ban religions.
Right. Because Jesus was a capitalist. Jesus famously loved capitalism, right? Talked about how great free markets were all the time, and how if you're poor, then that's it. You just didn't work hard enough, and you don't deserve anything. That, Jesus, that was like a central theme of his message, right? Don't give your money to the poor because they don't deserve it. They have to work for their money, those lazy immigrants, right? Isn't that so? I feel like I remember reading that in the Bible somewhere. Yeah, totally. I'm on board.
Objective to disconnect people from God, where they ban religions. And of course, right now it's more like discouraging it, shaming it. But with
I discourage and shame extremism, not religion. I have no problem with Christianity or religion at all in general. No problem with it. It's nutcases I have a problem with.
full-on communism, they ban religion. Why is that? Because they don't want people having faith in a real higher power. So if you can get people to disconnect from God, if you get people to disconnect from the teachings of God and the ways of God, the belief in God, then those communists get to be your higher power.
Wow. God, dude, we took a weird turn in this conversation, didn't we? How the hell did we end up here? Well, for what it's worth, in communist Russia, in the USSR, back in the, the 30s to the 80s or somewhere in there, whenever it was. Specifically in the 1950s is when it was really big, I think, before Stalin died. Religion was not banned, to my knowledge. It was heavily regulated and controlled, and it was like an arm of the state. The problem in communist USSR, communist Russia, was that the state used the church as a method of bolstering its own credibility and power. The problem was the blurring between the separation of church and state. There was no separation. They were one. And they effectively turned Stalin into like a religious leader. That was really the issue. I mean, that's actually how it happened. Now let's listen to his bastardized interpretation here.
And honestly, they make a crappy higher power. They don't even make good fertilizer. That's not a good substitute for God. But for people who want to control you, which is what evil is, anytime someone tries to control you in a way that's not in your best interest, that's what I call evil. So for the force of evil, that is communism, wanting to control you, they realize people who have a faith in a real higher power, God, they're not controllable. So we have to become their higher power. We need them to depend on us, not depending on their faith in God, but that we need them to depend on us.
So he's saying he's going to be a contrarian just for the sake of being a contrarian, right? If somebody wants him to do something, he's intentionally not going to do it. Am I reading this correctly?
Need us, be obedient to us, or else communism just doesn't work. And even when that happens, it still doesn't work, but nonetheless.
Okay, well, it's interesting he mentions all of this. Let me explain something about how cults operate and what they are. A cult, at its most fundamental, is an attempt to control a group of people. They exercise control over others. The bite model, a model used to determine if something is a cult or not commonly, it has its problems, generally, but aside from that, the BITE model is an acronym, stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control. It's the 4 ways in which cults control their members, right? You have to control people in these 4 categories, in these 4 different ways, or you risk losing control over them. If they lose their ability to connect with somebody emotionally because you've told them they're supposed to shun outsiders, they'll start looking out for new information. If you block their information and their emotional connections with outsiders, they'll start thinking about things more critically. That's the thought control, the T in BITE. You have to control these 4 areas of somebody's life, or you risk losing control. That's the idea here. It's basically an abusive relationship between a group and a cult leader. That's what a cult is at its most basic. Now, what he's saying here, let me step back.
And even when that happens, it still doesn't work?
You're talking about controlling people and stuff. The problem with cults is that they never really fit into society quite right. Like, there's always some conflict with wider society, and it varies from church to church, from cult to cult, group to group. With Jehovah's Witnesses, they've had many, many, many different conflicts. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses have put their best effort into effectively turning themselves into a government. They want to act as the government for their people, right? But in doing so, they drop the ball constantly. They mishandle cases of child mistreatment, CSA cases. They mishandle everything constantly. Because they have a rule called the 2-witness rule, where there have to be 2 witnesses or 2 victims before anything is done about anything at all. And that's not how the real world works. Police have other resources at their disposal, like, DNA testing, forensics, and stuff like that. That's why we have police in society. But Jehovah's Witnesses kind of refuse to bring outside authorities in to deal with problems. And they view every problem as internal. Here's another example. They refuse to take part in militaries of any sort, no matter what, ever. Even if it's just you're like a cook, or even if you're just a janitor or something, you're not allowed to be part of a military under any circumstances. And there are some countries out there that, it's mandatory that you be part of their military. Every person has to be part of the military. Now, most of those countries have exemptions. You can do community service instead of joining the military. But there have been times when Jehovah's Witnesses have told their people in some countries to bribe officials to get the card that says that you served. There's always some little hang-up with cults, something where they don't fit into society, because as a society, as a civilization, we expect people to act in a certain way, in a dignified way, and respect each other's rights. And cults have something, or cult leaders have something of a superiority complex, and seemingly like to put their people through serious trials, like serious problems. I mean, what is somebody checking themselves out at a leader's behest, if not the ultimate expression of control over that person, right? And I feel like the group that he has found himself to be a part of now, this guy here, this evangelical kind of extremist group, it's a cult. This kind of MAGA extremist group is very much a cult. They've convinced their people that they are correct about everything, and if you disagree, then you need to be removed from their lives. They limit the information that they take in. They limit the emotional connections that they have with others that are not part of the group. They've changed their behavior to closely match up. They're almost like clones of each other, And they've completely shut down critical thinking. They use thought-terminating cliches and loaded language and everything exactly the same way that a cult does. Now, what this guy is talking about is his conflict with society. Every cult has that conflict. This is him expressing his interest in conflicting with wider society. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses don't join militaries. His group is going to refuse to take a vaccine or even refuse to take COVID tests. You know, it's not even about like taking a vaccine. You don't want to take the vaccine? Fine. We never had a vaccine mandate in the U.S. Take a weekly test as an alternate. That is the only expectation. Throughout the entire pandemic, you were expected to take a weekly test, and you could be exempted from that weekly test by getting vaccinated. But his group called that a vaccine mandate and screamed and cried and lost their minds and said that they're being persecuted and everything else when we were just trying to keep wider society safe from people like him. So I hope that I have firmly established that this guy is most definitely part of a cult, unfortunately.
But nonetheless. Now, there's a lot I don't know, but one thing I do know is when you have faith in God, you are not controllable. You're not. The fear-mongering, the fear of death that ultimately all fear-mongering points to, like, hey, the climate's changing, the climate's gonna kill you. Hey, look at this disease, look at this.
Dude, I am so surprised that this guy, of all people, like, landed on the other side of climate change and says that it's not real and all that other stuff. That's something that, you know, this cult buys into. That's one of the prerequisites to be a part of it, is to refuse to accept basic science, you know, about, like, climate change or whatever other thing. And it just blows me away that he ended up on that side knowing where this guy came from. It's not fear-mongering, it's societal problems. Like, society has problems we have to deal with, you know? There's a gun problem, there's a climate change problem, there's a corruption problem within politics. I mean, these things are problems we have to deal with. We're not trying to scare you with these problems, but they're things that we need to deal with. And he's pretending that this is like some move against these poor persecuted Trump supporters, these poor persecuted MAGA people, like they're out to get him or something.
Points to, like, hey, the climate's changing, the climate's gonna kill you. Hey, look at this disease, look at the death toll on the bottom of CNN. All that fear-mongering really preys on the fear of death that people have. But here's the deal. When you believe in God, you also therefore believe in the afterlife. You believe in heaven. So you don't really fear death the way you fear death if you believe there is no God.
I mean, I think everybody has the same fear of death. Nobody wants to face that, generally, for the most part. I mean, you have this fabricated hope at the end, and if that makes you feel good about yourself, then fine, whatever. But either way, life is the most precious thing in the universe, in my opinion. And even one lost life, no matter who it is, even one, is a tragedy beyond comprehension. Any life, any lost life is a tragedy. Now, what this guy's doing is setting up an argument for the idea that we should drop masks, drop vaccines, drop any COVID protections or preventions of any sort. I mean, from the very start. He's setting up an argument for not doing anything. In fact, letting COVID spread even faster and harder from the very start. And you know why? Because he has this hope of heaven. You know what? Why is it so bad for people to die and go to heaven? That's like the mindset that he's picked up. That's unglued from reality. And so sad. JP Sears is a conservative comedian. He's against COVID vaccines and face masks as well. Oh, yeah, he's complete and utter butter. It's really, really sad. Yeah, thank you for the message there. Really sad stuff, man. He's always kind of had weird views, but in recent years particularly, it's bad. It's real bad. Kyle Nobles, thanks for great content. Unfortunately, I have friends who adore JP Sears, for the far-right anti-vax and anti-trans. Yep, absolutely. He is like a... what would you call it? Kind of like a celebrity in those circles, sadly. And he's huge. He's got like 3 million subbies. It's crazy. Do you think it's possible that God exists and is benevolent, but is just incompetent? I mean, yeah, anything's possible. I think if you believe in Christianity, then you couldn't possibly think God is incompetent, right? That's like a prerequisite to believing in God as a Christian, is to believe he's not incompetent, that he's all-knowing and all-wise, right? I mean, I guess it's a possibility. I couldn't say. I enjoy your show, Owen. I believe in God, just can't attend any organized church. Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that sentiment. Dude's not new. Thought he was full of it years ago. Glad you covered these nuts. I appreciate that, Steve Brown. Absolutely. Yeah, this guy definitely needs to be covered, especially since he released this absolutely unhinged Got God episode, or this Why I Love Jesus episode with a Got God shirt on. It's just crazy, man. All right, let's keep listening here. JP Morgan is literally a blueprint of how not to be a likable human being. You mean JP Sears? Is that who you're referring to? I think JP Morgan is the first part of the name JP Morgan Chase. Anyway, let's keep listening.
Your death if you believe there is no God. Why? Because you're like, well, okay, if I die, which I don't want to, but if I do, okay, I'm in heaven. That's actually beautiful. So
yeah, and he uses that as a justification for allowing more people to die during a pandemic. Who cares? I mean, they're going to heaven anyways, probably, right? And if they don't go to heaven, they'll go to hell, and they deserved it. So, yeah, just let your grandma die of COVID. Let the millions and millions. How many millions of people have died from COVID so far? Not just in the U.S., but worldwide. Was it 6 million worldwide or something? 6.9 million looks like, roughly. 6.9 million people. Let them die. And those are with the precautions we took. How many people would have died if we hadn't taken any of the precautions the way that he's suggesting? I could see arguments for the idea that it could be as high as 10 million, maybe even as high as 20. Higher. That's what he wanted. And here's his argument. Why not? Who cares? They're going to heaven anyways. I don't care. This is the real danger of religious fundamentalism, or one of the many. Life is precious. It gives you an excuse to completely devalue life and not care. And that's just disgusting, man.
So the brave, bold freedom statement of it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees becomes something that people of faith will live by.
Okay, you know what? Fine. It's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. That's a weird statement, but I get the idea behind it. The sentiment is it's better to die a free man than die a slave. And that's an honorable thing, right? An honorable position, in my opinion. Except there aren't any, authoritarian extremist crazies out there trying to control you the way that you seem to believe. This isn't happening. This is in your head, okay? The U.S. took reasonable precautions. They even fell short of what I think they should have done. I think that we should have had a federal lockdown. We never had a lockdown in the United States. I mean, state to state, some states shut down certain essential services, or certain non-essential services, I'm sorry. It was not organized, and people are free to travel from state to state, so that didn't really, solve the problem or benefit us as much as it could have. The vaccine mandate never existed, never had one. It was a testing mandate, and it was so easy to get out of it. It's absurd. All of it was half measures all the way down. And he's complaining about being oppressed over practically nothing. It's embarrassing.
That's why communists, globalists, anyone who wants to control you purposely tries to disconnect you from God, because God's way is freedom.
Who's trying to disconnect you from God? What?
Evil constricts, God frees. God gives us free will. That's our expression of freedom. That's God's way. Communists don't like that. Globalists don't like that.
Globalists, he says. Globalists. That's FYI, if you're not familiar with the term, it's usually a dog whistle for Jews. It's a more polite way of saying Jews. So if there are any kind of social norms or expectations at all, then I guess that means that Satan is involved. There should be absolutely zero social expectations or norms. Weird, because I was under the impression that Christianity had all kinds of social expectations and norms. Is that weird to anybody else? So they're perfectly A-okay with gay people getting married and everything then, right? Because freedom is God's way and restriction is Satan's way. Is that right? Am I reading this right? So you're okay with trans people getting gender-affirming surgeries and hormones and stuff then? Because that's freedom? Is that right?
Because God's way makes you uncontrollable to them. And we can see that tyrannical authoritarians attempt to disconnect people from their faith in God. It's certainly at play now. Now, statistically, 50 years ago, 98...
No, hang on. You can't just say something like that and then just walk away. We can't... Who is we? We can see... What was authoritarians trying to disconnect people from God? How? Who specifically? In what ways? Show me in what way there's some systematic effort to disconnect people from God. If you believe that, you live in a fantasy land. This stuff is why I became a Buddhist, right? It's absolutely nuts, dude. Vaccine mandates are not oppression. For gosh sake, take the damn vaccine. Do you think that I qualify as a rational Christian? I would say so, yeah, 100%. You've come across as a rational Christian to me. You and I disagree on a few things, but that's totally fine, you know? People can disagree on things, right? Nothing wrong with that. The problem is when there are dramatic clashes with society in general, when there are like dramatic hang-ups and issues that come to a head and end badly, you know? I don't know. It's just, it can get really ugly when you're dealing with people like, you know, people in cults. Get that right-wing cash, JP. Easy dollars. Yeah, absolutely. You know what, though? I don't think it's about money for the guy. I think a lot of these people genuinely believe it, really. Even Dave Rubin. I think these people are true believers, honestly. It's just disturbing stuff, man. In fact, I have a pet conspiracy theory of my own, since we're talking about conspiracy theorists. I have a conspiracy theory that, you know, Russia has historically meddled in our social media networks and used our free speech laws against us in the United States, like a lot, right? And they even created, famously, right-wing social media groups and left-wing social media groups in an effort to just create radical polarization between two groups. And it worked. You know, it caused chaos the way that Putin intended. I mean, this is not up for debate. This is established fact now. We have, you know, names of Facebook groups and the memes that these groups spread. But I have this conspiracy of my own where I suspect that Putin, like, gets people close to famous actors, famous people, famous influencers, JP Sears, Elon Musk, I mean, whoever. I mean, that's not a conspiracy. We know they do that too. People have been convicted, or they've been indicted for that by the U.S. government, for doing that exact thing, acting as Russian spies to get close to people of influence. And my suspicion is they create, like, these Facebook posts that are intended to propagandize to these very specific people. You know, they get people close to them, and they find out what subreddits they browse and what Twitter accounts they follow and stuff, and then they pay those Twitter accounts or those subreddit mods to put up a post that will slowly but surely propagandize and red pill these people, or just brainwash them, basically, turn them into nutcases. I suspected that for a long time. If Russia can get a few really, really high-profile influencers to start speaking out against the deep state and speaking in favor of QAnon and all that other garbage, it just furthers division and polarization. Who knows? Like I said, it's a conspiracy. I have no evidence for that, aside from the fact that Russia does create social media groups that spread memes, and they do get people close to high-profile people. So just kind of connecting the dots on that. These goons are the reason I watch Matt Damon movies. Bald Thanos. Appreciate that. I don't think I've watched a Matt Damon movie in a while. I'm not sure I understand the connection to that. Matt Damon is pretty good, though, from my recollection. Anyway, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. The far-right morality police are worse than anything from the 30s. I think you might be right, although McCarthyism was pretty bad. McCarthyism was horrific, actually. Oh, my God. I've talked about it a little bit on my channel. This stuff is why I became a Buddhist. Okay, hit that one. All right, let's keep listening here.
It's certainly at play now. Now, statistically, 50 years ago, 98% of Americans believed in God. Today, statistically, just 81% of Americans believe in God. And then from a political perspective, it's actually interesting to see that just 64% of Democrats believe in God, while 92% of Republicans believe in God.
Yeah, I don't trust a single word out of this guy's mouth because he's a propagandist. Don't believe these statistics unless you look them up. In fact, I think his first statistic was incorrect, even, the 81%. I don't know, maybe I'm incorrect on that. The point is, look it up. Now, just for the sake of argument, let's for a moment assume that all of that is correct. There's one distinct difference between now and the 1950s, and that difference is, right now, people are not just common believers. They're not just regular, run-of-the-mill, chill believers that don't hate anybody for anything or whatever. The people that believe in God on the right are extremist nutcases. There is a massive polarization even within religion. Either you are a religious nutcase or you're not religious at all, practically. That's not really exactly the problem. I mean, there are plenty of reasonable Christians out there, but the polarization is intense right now. And it was not this intense in the 1950s, not by a long shot.
And of course, right now, as it stands, the evil, the satanic ways, the communist ways tend to be much more abundant on the Democrat side. So it's not too surprising.
The evil communist ways are more abundant? I mean, can you cite any examples? Like, I'll take literally anything. What are you talking about? Communism is not infiltrating the Democratic Party.
Be much more abundant on the Democrat side. So it's not too surprising that just 62% of Democrats believe in God. And specifically, we see the coercion to disconnect people from God playing out in all kinds of propaganda. The gender ideology propaganda.
Oh, here we go.
Where they're attempting to get people to believe that God made mistakes, which is a fascinating way to basically get people to not believe in God because...
Wait a minute. People being trans means that God made mistakes. That's an interesting... God, there's so much to pull apart here. What a confusing ideology, dude. This guy is something else. Okay, well, we've got, these people like to doubt the existence of trans people. So let's just step away from the trans issue for a moment and address the gay issue. Let's just say gay. He believes being gay is wrong, ostensibly, right? Did God make a mistake there? I mean, how would you, if he believes that it's a mistake or it's bad, and God created gay people, how do you rationalize that? I don't understand. Where is his head? Either God created us and he made mistakes, or he didn't create us. I don't understand where his head is at all. I don't understand where he's going with this.
Where they're attempting to get people to believe that God made mistakes, which is a fascinating way to basically get people to not believe in God, because if you believe in God, you probably believe God doesn't make too many mistakes. Like, hey.
Yeah, FYI, the idea that God is all-knowing and all-powerful is not biblical. That's not something that came about in Christian theology until, centuries after the Bible was written. It was already established, and they were just kind of creating their own beliefs around the Bible when this one popped up. Same with the Trinity and the belief in hellfire. This stuff is not in the Bible. It's not supported by Jesus, not believed by Jesus. None of it is really Christian, quote unquote, in the truest sense. Here, let's step back a little bit here.
Because if you believe in God, you probably believe God doesn't make too many mistakes.
Right. So the idea that God's all-powerful and all-knowing makes absolutely no sense, honestly, from a biblical perspective. Just go back to the book of Genesis and read about how God was wandering around looking for Adam and Eve, couldn't find them, didn't know where they were. That's a weird thing for God to do if he's all-knowing and all-powerful and all-wise, right? God was never supposed to be all-knowing, all-wise, and all-powerful. That's just a weird bit of theology came up later. All right.
Because if you believe in God, you probably believe God doesn't make too many mistakes. Like, hey, look at this junk between my legs. I'm the wrong gender. So they try to teach us your mind, what you want. You are right, God's wrong. God made a mistake. Dude, you're totally right about you should be a woman.
So is he saying that you are wrong if you're gay, for example? Not God, but you? You shouldn't want to be gay. You should try to correct that and not accept it? Is that what he's trying to communicate? I mean, that doesn't exonerate God from having made the mistake in the first place, does it? If that's how you view it. This whole ideology is confusing nonsense, all of it.
God made a mistake, so, there probably is no God. But when we see all this gender ideology stuff that hinges on that principle that there probably was a God.
Dude, it doesn't hinge on anything. Like, being trans doesn't address the question of God at all in any way. Has nothing to do with anything.
That hinges on that principle that there probably was a God. He wouldn't be screwing up your gender now, would he? We see that coming at our kids all the time.
At our kids? Who is telling kids that God made a mistake and thus he's not real because there are trans people? What is he talking about? This is nonsense.
And amongst other devious intentions behind that kind of ideology, I believe one of the principal ones at its core is to disconnect people from their faith in God.
Devious intentions. Devious intentions. There are devious people behind the scenes pulling strings like puppet masters, attempting to separate people from God because they hate God or they're angry with him or whatever. And being trans or being gay or being whatever is a satanic plot. I mean, you seeing this? You seeing where this guy took this? It all started out fairly middle of the road, mostly reasonable, and then just slowly but surely took a far right turn and nosedived into the side of a mountain. This is nuts, dude.
So here's what I believe now. I now look at traditional Christian values with a lot of respect and reverence, and I'm integrating those more into my life. I will make no claims that I'm the world's best Christian or most devoted Christian, but I'm looking at these Christian values and they make way more sense to me now than they previously did. Christian values around faith in God. Christian values around family first.
Okay, what Christian values are there that revolve around faith in God? I don't understand. Is he saying, like, you should put prayer before everything and try to solve every problem by praying about it instead of, not in addition to, but instead of taking real tangible action, like, I don't know, gun reform, for example, to stop mass attacks in schools? Is that what he's talking about when he says faith in God? I mean, I really don't understand what he means. And family first? What does he mean? I mean, these are all dog whistles to something. I'm just not sure which bizarre ideology he's dog whistling to right now is all.
And I now believe that the power of prayer is the most important thing you and I can do. I believe prayer is powerful. I believe prayer brings about change. I believe prayer
Well, look at the effect here. You can see the camera zooming in. That's really interesting. I'm not sure if that's like a digital effect or an actual camera effect. Did he have a cameraman that was zooming in for him or what? Interesting.
Prayer is powerful. I believe prayer brings about change. I believe prayer brings God into a place where God is needed, where God has been absent of, where the evil has starved out the oxygen of God. I think we need more prayer. Now,
Okay, great. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. Go nuts. Pray to your heart's content, but don't substitute real, tangible action for prayer. you should be taking real action to solve problems, like gun reform.
I don't know for sure. Here's how I look at prayer. You just imagine you're in an underwater submarine as opposed to the above water submarines.
Okay.
But nonetheless, you're underwater in a submarine and you've got a limited oxygen supply. When oxygen starts running out, you're in trouble. And you look around the world today, people.
Well, for what it's worth, this is kind of interesting. Submarines operate off of a really fascinating process. So I don't know if you guys knew this. I went to school for chemistry for a while and to college for it. And I learned about all kinds of cool stuff. You know that if you electrify water, it separates the water into hydrogen and oxygen. So submarines will use nuclear power sometimes to electrify water, which separates it into hydrogen and oxygen. And then they use the hydrogen, they burn the hydrogen to power the submarine and circulate the oxygen throughout the cabin or whatever you call it so that people can breathe. If you run out of oxygen, then it means your power supply has failed and you're in bad shape. But okay, sorry, just little aside there.
It's running out, you're in trouble. And you look around the world today, people are in trouble. They really are. So what can you do? You need this oxygen. It's your life force. So, okay, we got to bring oxygen from the surface down to us here in this little submarine where we're at. How are we going to do it? Well, if you're in a submarine, some kind of tube system going up to the surface that pumps down oxygen into the submarine where it's needed. That's what you got to do. And I think prayer works.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me just step back, listen again, because I feel like I missed what he said, and it was just weird.
Tube system going up to the surface that pumps down oxygen into the submarine where it's needed. That's what you got to do.
Okay, so he's saying you need to pump oxygen into your life from God. Okay, if that's what you want to do, go nuts. I have no problem with that. But we should still do gun reform.
And I think prayer works in a similar way, where you look at where prayer is needed, God's will is needed. It's absent of God. Whether it's like, hey, the World Economic Forum or political prisoners from January 6th.
Oh boy, we're going off the rails now. Yeah, there are no political prisoners from January 6th, only insurrectionists. And the World Economic Forum, if you don't know this story, to make a long story short, they're part of the conspiracy theory called the Great Reset, mentioned earlier. Let's just read through. This is a BBC article on what the Great Reset is. This is the title, What is the Great Reset and How Did It Get Hijacked by Conspiracy Theories? A vague set of proposals from an influential organization has been transformed by online conspiracy theorists into a powerful viral rallying cry. What is the truth behind the Great Reset? Believers spin dark tales about an authoritarian socialist world government run by powerful capitalists and politicians, a secret cabal that is broadcasting its plan around the world. Despite all the contradictions in the last sentence, thousands online have latched on to this latest reimagining of an old conspiracy theory, updated for the age of COVID. Yeah, the Great Reset conspiracy really came straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This old book I've mentioned before multiple times, written by anti-Semitic people that basically described the Jews' plan for world domination. It was completely made up then, and it's made up now. Anyway, let's keep reading this. Where did it begin? Like many popular conspiracy theories, this one starts with a grain of fact. In June 2020, so 5 months after COVID really came to the shores of the U.S. and the world started taking it seriously, June 2020, the Prince of Wales and the head of the annual Davos Summit launched an initiative calling for the pandemic to be seen as a chance for what they called a great reset of the global economy. A flashy launch video interspersed images of a world in chaos, a dead killer whale, a hurricane, a kangaroo caught in a fire, with a speech by Prince Charles. we have an incredible opportunity to create an entirely new sustainable industry, entirely new sustainable industries, the prince said. The time to act is now. Now, as I'm sure you've surmised at this point, the Great Reset is a massive conspiracy theory that encompasses nearly everything, but doesn't really have any details. It's weird how it all formed out, but think about this. Who serves to gain from the conspiracy theory that we have to prevent economies from serving the workers? The original plan that was being outlined at the Davos summit, when it says calling for the pandemic to be seen as a chance to reset the global economy, they were saying reset it to be more amicable and fair and more equitable to workers. Serve workers' rights. Who serves to gain from spreading this conspiracy theory, really? You can't convince me that billionaires around the world were not involved in turning this into a conspiracy theory. You can't convince me. The other founder of the initiative is Professor Klaus Schwab, head of the World Economic Forum, which organizes an annual summit in a Swiss ski resort for some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people. He explained the idea behind the Great Reset in an article accompanying the launch. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world to create a healthier, more equitable, and more prosperous future. Who do you think had an investment in making this fall apart and turn into a conspiracy theory? Who do we know that is opposed to making things more fair and equitable and healthier? And suddenly, out of nowhere, it just explodes, and every conspiracy theorist in the world buys into this Great Reset thing. There's a Great Reset podcast and even a 280-page book, but the plan is light on specific detail. Professor Schwab does speak about a wealth tax and ending fossil fuel subsidies. Interesting. Who would be opposed to those things, I wonder? But the scope is huge, covering technology, climate change, the future of work, international security, and other themes, and it's difficult to see precisely what the Great Reset might mean in practice. This lack of clarity, combined with the plan being launched by an influential organization, provided fertile ground for conspiracy theories to grow. This is Klaus Schwab right here. A conspiracy theory is born. The proposals, along with the WEF itself, face legitimate criticism from a variety of sources. Conservative political figures and media outlets accuse the organization of pushing for environmental policies that would hurt the economy. Weird, huh? So it sounds like the Great Reset was intended to improve environmental policies, to make the world more equitable and fair for the worker. What were some of the other things they listed here? Create a wealth tax, work on technology, work on climate change, work on privacy rights, a whole bunch of other stuff. Such a weird... Who created this conspiracy, I wonder? What group of people would be opposed to these things? This is so weird. We'll never know. We'll never know who was opposed to this. What group of people could have started this conspiracy theory? It's just a mystery. There are questions about whether unelected individuals like Mr. Schwab should have the power to lobby so prominently for ideas that could potentially transform the global economy. Okay, well, he's unelected, but he's free to voice his interests and concerns. Everybody is. That's the nature of democracy. The Davos meeting is certainly filled with powerful people who have a huge influence on world events. There are also concerns about the impact of technology on civil liberties and jobs. But the real energy online is not about legitimate political questions, discussions about fossil fuels and income inequality, but in the shape of wild and unsubstantiated claims. The term Great Reset has received more than 8 million interactions on Facebook and been shared almost 2 million times on Twitter since the initiative was launched, according to BBC Monitoring Research. Number of Great Reset posts on Facebook, posts using keywords between June 2020 and May 2021. Among the most popular posts are baseless statements that the Great Reset is a strategic part of a grand conspiracy by the global elite who somehow planned and managed the COVID-19 pandemic. In this narrative, lockdown restrictions were introduced not to curb the spread of the virus, but to deliberately bring about economic collapse and a socialist world government, albeit run for the benefit of powerful capitalists. So there's mention of the Great Reset when the plan comes out, June 2020. And then Justin Trudeau released a viral video about, the Great Reset, and it just exploded in the number of posts online about it. The number of posts on Facebook. Interesting, right? And then conspiracy theorists started coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas. In this narrative about the COVID-19 pandemic, lockdown restrictions were introduced not to curb the spread of the virus, but to deliberately bring about economic collapse and a socialist world government, albeit run for the benefit of powerful capitalists. The nebulousness of this conspiracy theory means it's found followers among anti-vax activists, anti-lockdown campaigners, New Age healers, and those on the far right and the far left. J.P. Sears he used to be kind of funny, but now he's a complete nutcase. And he's got like millions of subbies, I think. It's the guy in the middle of this picture right here. You'll own nothing and be happy, the Great Reset. Now look, Franklin Graham, televangelist, even got in on the action. How did it go viral? These conspiracy theories began circulating online around June 2020, but only gained significant traction later in the year. On November 15th, the phrase started trending on Twitter when a video went viral showing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a UN meeting in September, saying the pandemic provided an opportunity for a reset. It's unclear whether he's referring to the WEF plan. But some claimed his speech was proof that global leaders were using the pandemic as a pretext to introduce a range of socialist and environmental policies. Thousands of Trump supporters boosted this idea. They claimed that a victory for Mr. Trump in November's election was the only chance to thwart the so-called secret plot. They called it Agenda 2022, I think. Agenda 2022 or Agenda 2020, something like that. And the idea was they wanted to have... Or maybe it was Agenda 2023. I don't remember now. The idea was that they wanted to have the Great Reset fully implemented and a one world government implemented by 2023. But no, it was 2020. And Trump getting elected in 2016 thwarted that plan and pushed it off. And now it's Agenda 2030. It just completely made up, all of it. It's all entirely fabricated out of the ether. So that is the Great Reset. I hear you asking, but what is it? And the answer is nobody knows. I still don't know what it is. Nonsense, that's what. It incorporates every conspiracy theory known to man. Lizard people and socialism and one world government, all of it. It's insane. So, yeah, it was picked up by QAnon and basically everybody out. Every conspiracy theory of every variety. QAnoners, anti-vaxxers, anti-lockdown campaigners, New Age healers, people on the far right, people on the far left. Like, it's just widespread is the point. Here are some other points that have kind of been worked into the conspiracy. The pandemic was created by the elites. Microchips will be injected into people that alter people's DNA and act as like your credit card, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, yeah, it borrows ideas from like a ton of conspiracy theories from the 18th and 19th centuries. It's just nuts, dude. It's just nuts, all of it. There's really nothing to it. It's all about conspiracy, honestly. There's really nothing more to it than that. If prayer solves all problems, then why have laws against gay marriage, rape, etc.? Just pray them away and Bob's your uncle, right? Exactly. Honestly, I feel like if you want to believe that prayer, like, resolves a lot of the problems that you have in your personal life, that's perfectly okay. But we live in a society, and we have to function as a society and assume that those elected leaders are the only ones that are, can get anything done. Like, you have to assume that this is why separation of church and state is so fundamental. You have to rely on elected officials to do something to resolve problems for you, because prayer, it's been proven without a shadow of a doubt, prayer does not resolve political issues. You can come up with any excuse you want for that fact, but that's what it is, Prayer does not resolve political issues, ever. Never has, never will. If you want to think it helps you find your car keys, fine. Anyway, yeah, thanks for the super chat there. Not the correct perspective. He believes that being LGBT is a choice, hence supporting the notion that people are the flawed ones, not God. Okay. Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. I can see that. God, that's so sad, isn't it? Like, imagine living life this way and viewing the world the way that he does. Just sad, man. We are not turning people against God. We just want you all to keep your religious beliefs off our bodies. 100%. Keep your ideas and beliefs to yourself and your family and whoever else wants to hear them. I don't, you know? Simple as that. It's just crazy.
Or children in public.
Sorry, let's step back here.
It's absent of God. Whether it's like, hey, the World Economic Forum or political prisoners from January 6th. Or children in public schools, or individual situations you or I might be in. We need God, we need blessings, we need support. How are we going to get it?
See, this is the problem. He's applying a hope that prayer is going to solve the problem. He's applying that concept to political issues. Prayer should never, ever be the answer to political issues.
So cool, we're in the submarine. I believe prayer becomes the tube that channels the oxygen of God down to us. So it's like, God's there, but we got to bring God into this situation. So I think when we're in a prayerful state of mind, we're opening up a channel to bring God where God is needed. And how the system tends to be set up, the way I believe God set it up, is we have free will, which means God loves us enough to function disconnected from God, if that's our choice, where we can bring God into this situation. So I believe when we pray, we're opening up a tube to directly connect from God and bring God into the space over which we're praying. We're bringing oxygen where it's needed.
Fine. Prove it. Prove that any of this works the way that you say that it does. That's all I'm looking for, is a little bit of proof. Otherwise, until you can provide that proof to me, shut up and let our elected representatives do the work that they're supposed to do. And stop turning to prayer for those solutions that the elected representatives are supposed to be enacting.
Sounds kind of artsy-fartsy. Obviously, that's not scientifically true.
I love it. He says it. Yeah. No, it's not it's not true in any way, shape, or form. But okay, go on.
But maybe it's metaphorically true. But nonetheless,
Okay, I don't know what that means, and that doesn't get us any closer to gun reform, so I don't know why I should even care.
I now view prayer as essential. It's what we need, and that's how I think it works. And get this, right now, I think we're at a time of spiritual warfare. We look at what's going on in the world, conflict between different nations.
Okay, I'm going to call it there for now. I'm going to continue this. Anyways, this is actually really fascinating. The guy is leaning heavier and heavier into these like really extreme positions, like talking positively about the January 6th insurrectionists and everything. This is just crazy, man. Let me know what you think in the comments.